We're the book friends that think good.
What does this mean for our life, for our world? Yiggity yeet, my dude. I'm happy to speak. Always happy to think.
I don't know how to do that. I can look into that.
Makes you sound like a book friend that can think good.
It's Jack and it's Weston.
BFTTGs. Yeah.
Jack, I think good. Sometimes I good think, too.
Makes you sound pretty good.
We might want to make it more concise. We are going to attempt to grapple and answer 3 questions. Number 1, what did we learn? Number 2, what did we disagree with? And number 3, what are we going to do about it? I am ready to roll.
I'm in it. Weston, my book friend, tell me, what book is it that we're thinking good about today?
Habit.
Are you feeling the craving?
Do you think good? This week, we are talking about Chapter 9 from Atomic Habits, which is the role of family and friends in shaping your habits. We have been kind of teasing at this. We've been thinking about this for a while now. So I'm very excited to get into it with you, my book friend.
Yes, my book friend. But first, what's up, my book friend? What's your week been like?
It's been, it's been going. It's been going. The master bath remodel that I talked about a few episodes ago has started and is happening. So there's dust everywhere in my house. So I apologize if I'm a little extra sniffly today. I feel like I've been breathing in a lot of dust this week.
Yeah. I've been sick, so I had some sick days this week. So I had lots of time to think about this, and also some time to review the parenting chapter from that Clear wrote. Have you taken a look at that at all? Okay, so atomichabits.com/parenting. He breaks down his 4 laws for parenting. Maybe it's something we'll revisit after we've read the whole book or looked at all 4 of the laws. But he only talks about, I just read, I read the whole thing, but I read the 2 that pertain to what we've talked about so far. Make it obvious, make it attractive. And the one thing I was disappointed with, and I think that this is something that we've talked about a lot, is there isn't any discussion about, how parenting affects your habits. It's more about like how to influence habits in your kids, or like how to use these tools to help your kids form good habits, which is good advice and like helpful, but not really, I think, what we were after in looking at that chapter. Still, I would say it has some good content. We'll come back to it probably after we finish the 4 laws, because that's when I think it will make the most sense.
All right.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. Yeah. If there's not a connection there between like the way that having a child and having kids impacts you, I kind of want to just throw it out. Like, that's too big of a disconnect. But anyway.
Yeah, right. Because that's... we talked about my trash habit last week, about failing to put out the trash on Fridays. And once again, I was late this morning for that same exact reason. But this week, it was not due to my bad habits. It was not due to like failing to miss cues. It was entirely due to the fact that I had actually built up a new plan for dealing with the trash, such that when I get in the door, I will take out the trash from wherever I'm going today. Like that was my thing. It's like when I come back home from anywhere, I like leave the house, I will take the trash out. And that will work on most Thursdays, because I actually work at an office on Thursdays out of my house. So I thought, oh, good, I've got a good plan this week. But this week, it just so happened that when I came back, because I was teaching a late class at the office, my daughter was asleep, and it was like, you can't take out the trash. It's going to wake her up. So perfect example of how, like, I had done my due diligence with my habits, but the interruptions arise where it's like, well, I have to work around this other person, and that other person is not, though predictable in some ways, not always predictable.
How loud are you with the trash?
It's just a loud process. But the main problem is we have an automatic gate that's right by her window, and that is loud. It's like sounds like a winding up a winch on like a Jeep or something.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it has like a an electric actuator, and it's super slow, but it automatically opens the gate, which is nice.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's definitely something we have been wanting and looking to see what Clear's going to say about that. How do we adjust to things that unexpectedly come up, right?
Yeah.
And I got to
And
say,
spoiler alert.
based on our, okay, I think I was going to do a little spoiler too, but I was going to say, you
Yeah.
talk about being disappointed in that article. I
Yeah.
was disappointed by this chapter. I'll say that up front. So,
Yeah, I'll say, yeah, spoiler, this chapter also does not address the issue that we were looking for.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, should we start with our pushbacks then?
Maybe, sure, why not?
Yeah, sure.
Go
why
out
not?
of order. Yeah, it's one chapter.
I guess, yeah, I didn't have any specific pushbacks that I took note of because it was just kind of an overall pushback for
Okay.
me, but it was pretty big. So we should probably talk about the chapter before I get into mine. But did you have any like
Sure.
specific pushbacks?
I do, and it's right up front. So actually, let me just summarize the chapter really quick. The role of family and friends in shaping your habits. In this chapter, Clear talks about three influences or three groups that influence our behaviors. And he says that friends and family are kind of, they're one of those groups, but there are actually three groups of people that will influence our habits and behaviors. They're the close, the many, and the powerful. We're drawn to kind of develop or perform the habits of the people closest to us. When in doubt, we will look to the group and follow what the group is doing rather than stick out. And then third, we want to follow the powerful because we want to be successful. So it's kind of about the role of positive peer pressure, or like making sure you're putting yourself in a place where you can be surrounded by the type of people who are going to basically keep you accountable to your habits. And my pushback was right up front with this chess family. He opens the book by talking about a family of chess prodigies, the Polgars. He talks about Lazlo and Clara Polgar, who Lazlo just sounds like maybe a little bit of a sociopath, but I'm not really sure. I don't want to put that entirely on him. But like, I'm going to train chess prodigies and I'm going to marry this woman because she can help me.
I'm going to specifically find a woman
prodigies.
and I'm going to lead with that. Like that's how he puts it into the day. He's like, immediately when he starts dating women, he's like, look, I have this crazy idea. And if you're not on board, we can just go our separate ways immediately. Like,
so yeah,
I totally agree with you, dude.
Yeah, props to Lazlo for knowing what he wants, though, I guess. He had a clear vision.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he wrote this woman, Clara, letters about raising chess prodigies with her before they had even met. I guess he was inspired by her teaching or something. But anyway, they did. They raised three little girls who all became chess prodigies, the youngest being the best. And the idea is, more kids, more chess, the more positive reinforcement you get for being good at chess, and the more normal that is in your environment, the better you will be at chess. This all sounds really great for this family, and I think I want to give credit to Lazlo because he probably wasn't a crazy man, or his family would resent him for pushing them so hard in chess. And it sounds like there were actually some beautiful moments, and like they all kind of rose to that occasion and whatever. But it immediately reminded me of an episode of Law and Order that Lindsay was watching one day that I saw, where it was this exact same scenario, but it was like with math. And the father was like abusing the girls and like putting them in this basement and like forcing them to do math drills. And like he wanted them to be aerospace engineers.
Hold up. You're telling me that an episode of Law and Order had some really bad and sad stuff, dude?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, but it was like this exact same story, but the shadow side of it, where it's like, like this all sounds fine and dandy for this family, but like if you force your own agenda on children, like odds are that's not going to lead to good outcomes. That was just my first pushback, was like, that sounds like a pie in the sky story.
Well, and my pushback...
one in a billion case or something.
Yeah, exactly, right? And my pushback with that is what we talked about a few episodes ago in terms of wanting to find balance and um, like just the pushback we had about goals. I think it might have been even in episode 1 when I was like, we need to step away from being so achievement focused
Hmm.
because at least based on that story, all of those kids, all of those little girls identify with being a chess master. So
Right.
what's going to
That's
happen
true.
when they can't play chess, or I don't know why they wouldn't be able to play chess, I guess.
Or their little sister eclipses them.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to know about. I was like, okay, so how do the first and second daughters feel now that the youngest is better than them? Because like,
Right.
is that truly the best option for those children? Um, because when you get your identity so wrapped up in those habits, which again I thought was like a missing piece from this chapter,
Yeah.
where James Clear doesn't connect back to chapter 2 when he's talking about identity based habits versus outcome based habits, where it's like this
Yeah.
seems like this is a very very dangerous example
Yeah.
of an identity based habit that can lead to very very bad things for that
Yes.
individual. So I think it's like
Well,
this
how
is
many
kind of one of
times have
those
you?
cases to me where it's like rose colored lenses where you're looking at it
Yeah.
from the outside and you're like, okay, they're a chess master, but also like how are they feeling? How are they doing? I don't know. One of
Yeah.
the things that I have a strong like ideal of is being well balanced. Like I don't want to
Yeah.
be too much of one thing. I want to know a bunch of different skills, and I think it's very valuable to um, be decent in a lot of things so that it's kind of like an investment strategy in yourself. You want to diversify your portfolio.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
think that just putting all the eggs in the chess basket, it's just, I just know. I agree. I did not like this example. I
Yeah.
think there's lots of flaws in it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it's not like this is a bad prescription for other people.
Yes.
Like maybe it worked out in this, one in a million case, but like this is not an example to be emulated in my mind.
Agree.
It's not one to be copied. It's one to look at and maybe study. Say like, oh, interesting. And to give James the credit here, he probably means that. He probably means like, just look at this extreme example of how environment shapes habits. But it is like over glorified, I think.
I don't want to give him that credit.
Okay.
Like, because he doesn't
All
say
right.
that. Because he doesn't say that. That's why
That's true.
if I had read a paragraph after this example and it said like, no, this is, I don't know. I didn't get that feeling. I didn't take any notes that said that.
That's true. He doesn't say like, I mean, he does say
Like again,
childhood of the Polgar sisters was atypical to say the least. And yet, if you ask them about it, they claim their lifestyle was attractive, even enjoyable.
but maybe I don't know. It's hard too because maybe that's him just trying to remain um, non-judgmental, and maybe that's him trying to remain neutral, so that
Yeah.
like you're not grappling with his personal beliefs. So
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah. Yeah. And also, the thing is like you see athletes or whatever, and you like, even though their interviews are like, oh yeah, this is fun. We love our life. It's like, you don't see what's going on behind the camera, right? Or behind the article or whatever. Like, oh yeah, my
I
life is great. While dad's in the background, like crossing his arms,
yeah.
watching, who knows?
Well,
But
I would make the
I don't
argument
want
that
to
it's
put
just
that on
like
them
it's
either.
not realistic to put anything in that sort of light as only positive. Literally anything.
Yeah.
If you do too much of it or are constantly doing it, or it's the only thing you do,
Yeah.
you're going to burn out. There's going to be negative aspects of it. Like
Yeah.
there's no job, there's no hobby that doesn't have negative aspects to it.
Yeah. And I think a good example of this is, have you seen King Richard?
I have not. I have not.
It's a movie that Will Smith just won the Oscar for, but
Total slapper.
had to be said. Yeah, so the plot of King Richard is basically the same as this, where it's like Richard was Venus and Serena Williams' father. Just shows like his unbending desire, like his just dogmatic, pursuit of tennis greatness for his daughters. And like he knew nothing about tennis, decided like my daughters are going to be tennis stars, and then pushed them to it. And The thing about that movie that I think is good is it does show the shadow side a little bit. Like you see the negative effects that has, and you see like Richard is not a perfect person by any means. Like he's actually a very problematic person, but still he instilled this greatness. And like Venus and Serena have a good relationship that's been well documented over the years of like Venus is genuinely excited about her sister's accomplishments. Like they've shared tournaments and stuff. So there are examples where this happens, but just to get a little bit of the other side of that story, I would recommend that movie for people because it can show like how that can be like detrimental, and how like identifying so strongly with one thing in your life can become a problem, a severe problem that leads to lots of other problems.
The other issue I had with this, I guess from my education lens, is that his quote on page 115, where it says, "One of our deepest human desires is to belong." I was just like, just a good reminder that like, yes, absolutely, I believe this so much. And I guess to give an example of like how much I agree with that is at the beginning of this school year on our school leadership team, we were trying to set out a goal. Now that we were coming out of the pandemic, we're back in person again. And I was influential in making our like big school-wide goal for the leadership team, student belonging. I pounded that table for that, being like, we need to make sure the kids and the students feel like they belong here, because the pandemic has fractured so much of that. And I agree with your thing about like the three groups, and I think this is where it gets into dangerous territory, because we imitate the habits of the three groups. The close, and this is why I feel like it's so hard as a parent to find that line, because I feel like with those examples that we just talked about, those are both parent examples. Those are both in a situation where there is a very strong power dynamic between the parent and the child. And the child is only trying to be a good child to their parent. Like they don't care about the child does not care about the many or the powerful. And these parents have created a situation where they've just like kind of, I don't know the word, influence or
I would say they do care about the powerful. And in that case, the parent is the power, right? Where it's like, you're kind of like as a parent, you're kind of like a surrogate for God, essentially, in a child's life, where it's like, I'm the authority that cares for you and like has this desire for you, and here's what it is. And like a lot of parenting is vision casting. If parents don't recognize this role that they play in a child's life, it can be very harmful, right? Like it's kind of like an authority that's given to you that needs to be like taken seriously and acknowledged, because kids have no choice but to respect your authority. They have no choice but to like look to you as the power in their life. And like, that's a very serious responsibility.
Right.
We talked about my pushback. So what was your pushback? Like you kind of started talking about the groups.
Well, yeah. So, I guess I was just agreeing that like, I think it works outward like that, where it's the close, the many, the powerful. I agree with that. And it reminded me that like the close, like we tend to emulate and have the same habits as the people that we become closest to, right?
Yeah.
And the whole phrase or the saying, you become who you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
So I think that was just, illuminating for me, or just thinking about like, just reminding myself like, or like there's been people that I've had to cut out in my life, and it's been for a reason. I think I tend to feel guilty because I want everyone to be, I believe that everyone can be really awesome people. But I think it's just, I've gotten to a point in my life too where I now understand that like people are just on different timelines, and it's not a judgmental thing to cut someone out when they're not on the same timeline as you. Like it's just not the right time.
Well, and I might even like make the argument, like it's not necessarily like cutting people out. Like I would just use maybe a different analogy for something like that, where it's like I'm taking a different trail. Like if you're hiking, on a journey through life or something like that. Like it's just kind of like I'm going to go this other direction without you, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I think that kind of,
And
and
you're
maybe
not invited.
yeah, maybe like our paths will like join back up later. You know, I think that that's one of the things that like we tend to look at relationships as like binary in that way. I think that that might be harmful too, where it's like either this person is uh, like it's a yoga mentality that I've heard sometimes when I go to yoga classes where it's like, um, leave whatever doesn't serve you. And I think like that's a very, um, while it sounds good on the surface, it's also kind of like a selfish concept, right? Where it's like, it's all about the things in my life serving me. Whereas I see things as a Christian, like it's all about me serving other things, right? It's all about me serving others, like finding like those people who help me and like push me to be more of a servant, like those kind of concepts. And it's like sometimes you have to change, like because the biblical principle is bad company ruins good character, right? And that is very true. Like um, we
Or
talked
one
about
bad apple
addicts.
can ruin the bunch.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I agree with you, but I think I've ran into in my experience where, well, I guess you need to figure out your line. You need to figure out your boundaries
yeah.
on some of those things with people because, um, yeah, it's like I don't know. When I was younger, I would tend to go out of my way, but then I was also being blind to like how it was impacting me. You know,
Yeah.
at what point do you have to like? I think that's why I say cut off because I had to cut people off for my sake, not
Mm.
not because they're bad people, but because I needed to I needed to focus more on myself. I was being too outward, right? And I think that's
Mm.
something that a lot of people tend to do as well, where you're not focusing enough on yourself. And something that's been more prevalent the last year or so is that like, yeah, I need to be the best version of myself to better serve other people. That's
Mm.
kind of my viewpoint on it now. Instead of, I think I used to have the reverse kind of psychology of that, where it was like I need to serve other people so that I'm the best version of myself. But what we don't realize or at least what I didn't realize is that there needs to be a balance there, right?
Yeah.
And that's why. So moving on to like the many, right?
Yeah.
Um, I guess I was viewing this from an educator lens, and it's one of the things that I've been able to break off of
Mm.
a lot in my life, and it's one of the hardest things to break off in a classroom or in a school because the kids want to belong and they want to belong in their peer group. And like we were just talking, the bad one bad apple can ruin the bunch, right? There's this very significant pattern in in schools where a class of 30 students will be by and large 85% fantastic, but it's like one or two students for some reason if they go off the path in a negative way, other students follow them, and like it's so weird. And I have to I've been successful with this in reframing it with some of those students in terms of like again trying to make it positive for them, but like look, basically it's the high charisma kids. They're constantly rolling nat 20s on charisma, and it's like
Yeah.
you need to wield that power that you have over other people more responsibly,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
when someone makes fun of them on the playground, they will then use that charisma to get revenge tenfold with like 10
Yeah.
other kids all making fun of
Yeah.
that kid. It's like, whoa, whoa.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's very hard to see. Like I just see that a lot. The many is the hard thing for us to break.
Yeah.
It's also something I see. It's a behavior mostly avoiding punishment or embarrassment rather than
Yeah.
trying to fit in.
Yeah.
And then this kind of led to me thinking about how this relates to the silent majority that can happen in a lot of situations or a lot of beliefs. Um, and this also reminded me of Mugatu in Zoolander when you could be going along and like you see all these people doing something or believing something, and I don't know, like, do you remember Zoolander Mugatu going, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. His look is the same. And, like, he's the only one that stands out, right?
Yeah.
Or, like, he's the only one that thinks he's seeing the truth, which he is.
Right.
So that was just kind of a funny thing I reminded me of. And then something else was just like, yeah, this is why impractical jokers and, like, prank shows like that work.
Yeah.
Because so many people just go along with the many, or like it's crazy seeing
Yeah.
those shows, seeing like how
Yeah.
far people will go just because someone else like said something, like
Oh yeah.
like
There's
no
like the,
evidence or no like anything
yeah.
but they'll just go along. Like, have you seen the episode of Impractical Jokers where they're just like waiting in line at like a Chipotle or something, I don't know, one of those like lunch spots,
Yeah.
and they just start looking at each other's mouths, like giving each other like dental diagnoses. And they rope this one dude in, and and they're like, yeah, open your mouth so we can see your mouth. Open your mouth. And the dude's just like, and just like and like, dude, what are you doing? Like, there's just stuff like that, like all the
three
time.
strangers.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's so funny.
Complete
I mean,
strangers.
well, and that's what like Clear talks about that because he says whenever we're unsure, page 120, how to act, we look to the group to guide our behavior.
Exactly.
And he also says most days we'd rather be wrong with the crowd than right by ourselves. I do think that this was the best piece of this. However, I wish he would have talked about like how big of a caution there is to this.
Yeah.
Like how dangerous this is for us. A little bit with a little bit more gravity, because that's so true. Like the thing that an episode of Impractical Jokers like that proves is how unsure most people are.
Yeah.
Right? Like I like to think of myself as the kind of person who would see that and be like, no, I'm not going to do that. Or if I do it, it's going to be because I'm going to be kind of silly and go do that with those people. Not because I'm like, I think I have to do this, you know? But that's the problem is like I think the thing with all of these categories, and the thing I wish that Clear would have done a little bit more with it, was talk about how dangerous this is.
Yeah.
You know, like all of this is stuff that like we need to be aware of so that we can, like he talks about kind of bending it to our desire. Like that's ultimately kind of his takeaway. And maybe the greatest learning for me, and the thing that I was thinking about in terms of application is, he says, one of the most effective things you can do to build better habits is to join a culture where one, your desired behavior is normal behavior, and two, you already have something in common with the group. The problem is he uses like, the only problem with that is that you're using your own desire as the gauge for how to like work in a crowd. And I just think you need so much more than that.
Yes.
Like there's so much self-work that needs to be done to ensure like, are those desires good? Are the things that I'm trying to build in my life healthy? And so much of that will already be influenced by these pressures anyway.
Right. And to go along with that too, are they sustainable in the long term? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Are they things, if I do those things consistently, am I going to be the person I want to be 10 years from now?
Yes.
20 years from now, right? Like, I think that just avoiding that short-sightedness.
Yeah. Dude, a perfect
important.
example of this and like the dangerous effect of this is CrossFit. Now, nothing against CrossFit. If you're a CrossFitter, like go you, that's awesome. You know, I think that CrossFit can be done very well. However, it sucks in a lot of people that develop injuries very quickly. And the reason is they see this thing, they're like, oh, cool. These are like fit, cool people who are working hard. Like this is all what I want to do. And CrossFit is very built around this. You have powerful people, the coaches, who are like these insane athletes. They're like, you know, most of them are like freak athletes where you're like, even if you worked as hard as you ever could, they're just like genetically predisposed to be machines, you know? So like you have the powerful. They like give off this feeling of like success that pulls you in a little bit. Then you have the closeness of like most CrossFit gyms are like tight communities. Like you start going there and you're like close with those people because they're pretty small and they have high prices. So you like get in, You're with this group of people. You're all kind of like paying the membership, so you're committed to going. And then you also have the many, where you have this critical mass of people who are all like doing these Olympic lifts, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do 40 cleans in a row as well. And like that all looks really good, but it's also very dangerous. You know what I mean?
No, I know what you mean. It's just like, I've been lifting for a long time now, so it's like I have never liked CrossFit.
Yeah.
Like when you say it looks good, to me it's like that never looked good. I was like, why?
Yeah.
Like that's like I think I went to one session of CrossFit, and instantly within that session, because I'd already had lifting experience, and I think that's the hardest part, right? But because I'd already had lifting experience, I was like, this doesn't seem safe. This doesn't seem sustainable. This does not seem good for the long term.
Well, and even like, about my journey with CrossFit, I was in a CrossFit gym for about 6 months. And I had a ton of lifting experience and Olympic lifting experience. Like I was like, I'm going to be here, but I'm going to pace myself. And still the power of the many can just push past your own. Like the crowd has such a powerful influence on us. We need to treat it with a lot of caution.
Absolutely.
Because the many will push us much harder than we realize.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This also reminded me, and it goes along with, the crowd, of the tallest poppy syndrome. Or, the phrase, the tallest flower is the first one that gets picked. Because people don't want to stand out because of that, right?
Yeah.
People will get denigrated, picked on, verbally undermined, put down, because they are, one, doing something different, right? So it's all, we've had this conversation when we were like going to different countries and stuff, where it's like, don't say their culture is weird. It's just different.
Right.
But a lot of people will be like, oh, it's so weird, just because it's not how they have done it or have seen it done before, right? So it's like there's a lot of that verbal undermining. But then there's also the jealousy. There's also the, oh my gosh, that person is growing. They're getting better than me, faster than me. I want to pull them down. Like, you get back here, like you're not allowed to be better than me, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of that as well. So it's not only just like it's just a bunch of like everyone has this inflated view of themselves, I think.
Yeah.
And it leads to so many bad things in that group setting.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, well, and there's also the danger of like, it's not just the crowd that is dangerous to us. It's those that stand outside the crowd too. Like, I think of zebras. Zebras are like a horde of black and white stripes, and that's a survival mechanism so that they don't stand out. Like predators can't pick them off. But as soon as the zebra gets separated from the herd, it's dead. It just can't, like, as soon as it's isolated, the lions encircle it, or jackals or whatever, and it's isolation that kills the zebra.
Totally. I think that's why it's so ingrained in us and so hard to break away, because it's such a natural thing. Such a natural thing. And humans are not, as much as some men would like to think, we are not lone wolves. Like, we are not alpha animals, apex predators by ourselves. We are basically apex packs.
Yeah. And maybe that's the thing, like, and I guess this is the point that Clear is trying to make here, is like, we can't escape these realities. So we need to exhibit some control over them. Right? Like,
yeah. And that's actually, so this is another thing I thought about with this is, with the world being as global as it is now, it's easier than ever to find one of those groups that you do fit into.
Yeah.
Right? But the downsides of that, and the downsides of our global internet connected societies, is that we then tend to jump. Because I think when he talks about the close, the many, and the powerful, I believe that that's the order we should have those in. We need to value the close more than we value the many, more than we value the powerful, right?
Oh, yeah.
And what can happen in our world today is that we tend to jump, or we can jump, right? Where it's like, I'm so into the web and the computer and these online communities that I will ignore or I'll skip over the people that are actually close to me in my life.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we've talked about, at least with our previous books, where it's like if you ignore the close, that's the heart. Like it needs to work outward, kind of like we talked about with the habits in chapter 2. It needs to work from the close to the powerful, and you can't skip steps or because we see what happens. Examples of people that put celebrities on a pedestal and they value them more than like their own mother or father or sisters, brothers giving them advice. It's like that's a very bad thing to do as well. You need to value things appropriately. And I had an example of this. In the middle of the pandemic, I got very into competitive Pokemon because
Yeah. Right.
we couldn't go anywhere, we couldn't do anything. But that
Yeah.
was a situation where I could go online and battle people, learn people. I joined a few online groups and I made some really good connections with people that were into the game as well. But I also got to the point where I had to hold myself back from going in further because I understood that if I went in further with that hobby, that would mean that I would be um, ignoring to a certain degree or not interacting with my wife and my son as much, right? So it's like you have to find those balance points where it's like, okay, that's enough.
Yeah.
I need to come back, or I need to
Yes.
make sure I don't go any further, right? Um, and perhaps this is just part of parenting, but I think it's important for us to focus on the close before we focus. Like just move close to many to powerful.
Yes.
Make sure that
Well,
you're not putting those in the wrong order.
and this is why I say, like, I kind of don't like the powerful as a category. But if I'm thinking about like optimizing my life or building habits or whatever, I want to chuck powerful, right? Like,
Oh yeah,
because like to me, like there's one power and it is God. Like everybody else is just human, right? Like we are all equals. There is no like people put status on other people, and that is manufactured. Like you can look at people and see like I don't think you should look at and desire power. Like that's what leads to things like vanity and greed. What you should look at is like, I like this character trait of this person, or like, I really admire this about this person, and look at that and see about like developing that attitude more than like, I want to be where they are in life, or I want to have the things that they have. I think that that's a better, like healthier way to look at things. And you can even look at celebrities that way, right? Like you can look at a person like Chris Pratt, the actor, and be like, I'm really impressed at like how convicted he is. Like he has strong convictions and he's not like bowing, or he doesn't like set them aside just because of his status. Like I like that about him as a person. But it's not like I want to be him. I want to like follow after everything he does. And like I may disagree with lots of things he does as well. It's just, I can look at that and say like, I like this character trait of this person who's in a prominent position, not I want all of the things that this person has. And so I'm going to like structure a life that imitates that.
yeah, I agree, and I think that's why we should, working outwards. It's like you should. Something else I noted here too, and thinking about if you jump to the many or the powerful too soon, or you put them on a pedestal or whatever, the immediate gratification we can get from that, where it's like you find a new group and you're like, oh my gosh, my people, right? And like
Yeah.
the immediate
Yeah.
gratification we can get from those groups becoming echo chambers and just reverberating our own beliefs back at us can tend to foster resentment or tension within the groups that should maybe be more important to you, like the close, right? Where you go back to that group and you didn't have an agreement on something, but you're like, but I have this group over here of people that I totally agree with. And so I think that immediate gratification of not being as close is very tempting and can lead us to some bad things too, in terms of creating tension that doesn't necessarily need to be there.
Can I share a story about that?
Absolutely.
So I have a friend who does trauma counseling in groups, and they shared that one thing that they found is that they have more success in their groups when their zip codes are further apart. they also have more success in their groups when they can enforce the rule that group members do not share contact information or real names. The reason for this is they get together with these people who've gone through trauma, and then their trauma compounds as they are closer to one another. It's kind of the same thing as like the addicts that we talked about in Vietnam. Right? As soon as they're removed from that environment, they're good. But these people are feeling like they're alone, and then they get together with people who are also broken, and they feel a closeness. But if they're not attending to, they need to deal with their trauma in their own family circles and their friend groups and their hometowns, they can re-enter those things and leave behind this other group to focus on the close. But if they get lumped in with this many feeling, they can go back to inappropriate coping habits. They can develop relationships that are destructive. So it helps to like separate those people as much as possible so that they can start work on the closeness, that like first layer around them.
I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
We already talked about this, but another concept with going to the powerful is the overconfidence effect or the overplacement. If you're not familiar with that, it's when you enter into a hobby or something like this, like chess or like competitive Pokemon or whatever, and you start to learn, and you get to a point where you're like, I'm pretty good at this thing, but you don't know what you don't know, right? And then you learn quickly if you keep going that it's like, oh wow, I'm terrible at this thing. I didn't know anything to begin with. And so it just reminded me too that if we tend to imitate just the powerful peoples, we can fall into that trap a lot easier too, of being like, well, Elon Musk said this thing and I fully understand it just like him now too. And but then you start actually discussing it with people and you're like, I actually don't know anything about rocket science.
Dude, this is what's happening with the crypto bros.
Oh.
It's like, oh yeah, blockchain and NFTs, blah, 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 blah. But it's like, oh, I lost my house.
Yeah. I mean,
I get it.
A very
nobody gets
tale,
it,
right? Yeah, just mind your ego too in that. Mind your ego for sure with this.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of why I think the close is so important, because just like you said, there's shared trauma, but there's also not many people outside of the close circle will tell you how it really is. Like that's how I value.
Yes.
That's how I know who is in my close. If they actually tell me how it is, because people that are not close to you, the many, you'll get into those echo chambers and they'll be like, oh, it's great, you're doing awesome, blah blah blah. But then like, I'll have a chat with my dad or whoever, and be like, no, dude, you're messing up. Like, snap out of it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the close, this is something that has eroded in our society. It really has, where it's like the close are there for you. And I think that that's something where like the cutting people out thing has become toxic in some ways, where it's like, well, whatever, I don't care what my parents think. I'm going to cut them out. I'm going to I just don't, I don't want to have anything to do with them or my siblings or my close friends or the people from my hometown or something. And the reality is so my two closest friends are you and then a guy I grew up with who's known me since I was 10, right? Like there's nothing I'm going to do that will damage our relationship. Like, we've known each other for 20 years, right? Like if he comes to me with something or I go to him with something, you can be guaranteed like that relationship isn't going anywhere. Listen, I love you. I have loved you for 20 years. I need to tell you this. And I'm doing it because I love you. Right. I'm doing it because I care about you, because I don't want to see this continue, right? I have this vision for you and I want you to hear that. Like, this is where good parents, this is good parenting, right? It's like, I have this vision for you. I've seen you. And it really is interesting to see a kid from the baby stage all the way through. Cause it's like, you hear those things when you're growing up, like I changed your diapers. I was there when you were this big and whatever. And like, that is really significant. It's like, I've been with you through your entire life. Listen, if anybody knows you, I do know you. So it would be worthwhile for us to reflect on that as adults. Like the people close to us do know us and like do have something to share about us and like do have something to offer us that we would be wise to listen to.
Absolutely. And to put my educator hat on again, and I hope that again, I've had success with this, so I hope you do too. Um, Something that I tell my students constantly, because like I mentioned in the beginning, my biggest thing in my classroom is belonging. Make sure that all the students feel like they belong and they feel safe expressing themselves and knowing that like the relationships in the room aren't going anywhere, even if they mess up, even if they make these mistakes and do those revenge tactics like we talked about. It doesn't mean that I'm cutting you out of the class or I'm not going to continue to help you grow, right? It doesn't mean that your teammates aren't going to forgive you, or at least that's where we try and get to, right? So something that I tell my students a lot, and I think that this applies to everyone when we can try to build this closeness, is that I tell them I cannot guarantee that I will always be nice to you, but I can guarantee that I will always be kind to you. And the way I differentiate those things is I tell them that being nice is telling you what you want to hear. And being kind is telling you what you need to hear.
Yeah.
And I always guarantee them that like I will be kind to you. I will tell you what you need to hear in that moment, even if it makes you feel really bad, because I know that you need that to grow. And just know that like where I'm coming from with my criticisms or if I'm giving you advice like that, it's coming from a place of love. It's coming from a place of wanting you to be the best person you can be. And I think that's kind of where a lot of these relationships we need to remember that that's where they stem from. The roots are in love. The roots are in caring for other people.
That's so true. And I think that gets me to, because this is my last question is, so what's the application for this, Weston? Like where do we put this in? And for me, I'll share my application first because it goes perfectly with that. The root is in love. Like, I see it from a church perspective where it's like, this is the value of the church. It provides close people, right? That are many and that live by different rules of power. Like when done well, the church should be a culture that helps inform your life in this way. And it inspires me as a pastor, the organizer of a church community, to think about like, how do we develop this so that we have closeness, mass, and like, so that we're giving people a chart for their life that leads them to life, not to ruin, and I think that's one of the values of church. And I think that's where the church falls short is it's always historically when the church weds itself with power structures, it goes far astray.
Yes. Well,
this
because
has always been the
structure,
case.
like you said, the power structure should be God.
Yes,
not any person or collection of people.
Yes. And I think I was talking with two guys just yesterday who were like, I'm glad that we're spending more time together because every time we spend time together, it's good. And these are both like Christian guys who have been around in community for a while. And the thing is like that takes a while to build up, but like over time, those become close relationships. And with time, those many can become close in a way that's helpful. And we need to keep in mind, like, one of the principles that kept coming to mind for me in this book was you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. It's just something I heard years ago. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but it's a good principle to keep in mind, which is like, who are you spending time around? And one of the guys was sharing, like, I've been experiencing some struggles lately and I don't know what to do. And I'm like, dude, call us, like call up people who care about you, even if they're not like as close as you would want them to. By reaching out in those moments, like you develop deeper closeness. And like that, I think, is my big takeaway from this is like where your desired behavior is the normal behavior and you share something in common with a group, we should think more deeply about that. We should take that to a spiritual, personal place. Like we should think about like not just what are my desires on a surface level, like, oh, I want to, play more video games or whatever. So all the people you're hanging out with are video game people, and like that's great. Like you have a whole gamer community around you. But the reality is like, what is that forming in you? Because what's the character of those people around you? So I guess that's my takeaway, is to think about that, like orient all of this around like character development, personal, spiritual, deeper things than like just fleeting success standards or markers.
I disagree with disagreeing with that.
Thank you for joining us, book friends. Next week on the BFTTG pod, Jack and Weston, they're thinking good some more with you, our book friends. Check out the show notes or the description, comment section for a link to the book and any articles that we talk about in the show. Bye-bye, book friends.
Bye for this time, guys.
Do a good thing today.
I love you.
Love you too, dude.